الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد والأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهر المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullah. This holy month of Ramadan, which comes with its barakat, and one of the barakat is that we get the opportunity to reflect on the Quran, which is the last message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the human society. The surah that I have selected for this year is surah number 65 of the Quran, known as Surah at-Talaq. The name is very dangerous, but don't worry about it. It deals with some of the important issues as far as human life, and especially the family life is concerned. In the last 3 nights, we have looked at different areas, especially concentrating finally on the first ayat of Quran. We have not yet completed that. It's a long ayat, but we will go to the last sentence of that ayat, which was left last night. This is the first ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, إذا طلقتم النساء فطلقهن لعدتهن وأحصوا العدة واتقوا الله ربكم لا تخرجوهن من بيوتهن ولا يخرجن إلا أن يأتين بفاحشة مبينة وتلك حدود الله ومن يتعدى حدود الله فقد ظلم نفسه. This is the part of the ayat that we discussed last night. This is the ayat where I left for today. وَلَا تَدْرِي لَعَلَّ اللَّهَ يُحْدِثُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ أَمْرًا. Basically, the summary of our discussion as far as this first ayat is concerned. Number one, it starts by addressing the Prophet, Ya ayyuhan nabi. Although it's addressing him, but the message is for the ummah. And this is the style whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to emphasize an issue or show the importance of it, he addresses the Prophet. The second thing was that, when it comes to the issue of aqd and talaq, these are opposites, even in the meaning, tying and untying. Tying the bonds of marriage, and talaq means untying the bond of marriage. Aqd and marriage is considered to be the most beloved thing in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas talaq is considered to be the most disliked matter in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as I said, that Islam has encouraged marriage, made it very easy. When it comes to talaq, Islam looks at the human nature. There are situations where marriage would not survive. And so Islam has allowed it, but it has made it difficult. So that people do not consider it to be something, a very trivial issue. And there are different conditions are put there, unlike the marriage ceremony or the marriage requirements. One of them was the issue of that the divorce be done at the time of tuhur, during the time of the purity, state of a woman during the month. And the other requirements that we discussed about. And then the second command in that ayat was that, you have to keep track of the iddah, the 3 months or the 3 cycles, which is kind of a grace period, because there are certain rules and regulations that they have to observe at that time, so they should know from when to when, the iddah is there. Number 4 was the issue that maintain taqwa. This is the main message of that ayat. Maintain taqwa, consciousness of Allah's presence in your life. that even when you are doing the most disliked permission in the eyes of Allah, be aware of Him and be conscious and do not, do something which will displease Him at that time. And we ended with the issue that, the wife stays at the husband's house because we are talking about the first of the three categories of talaq. I'll come to that in the next one. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends by saying that, remember, these are the hududullah. These are the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has imposed on you. Do not go beyond it, otherwise you will be unjust to yourself by making yourself liable for the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One more point that I mentioned last night was that there are three types of divorce in Islam. Number one is known as talaq. This is the one where the husband initiates because he doesn't, he dislikes the relationship. He doesn't want to maintain it. And so this is simply known as talaq. And this divorce is raj'i. Raj'i means there is possibility for the husband to revoke what he intended to do during that 3 months of iddah. And so that's known as raj'i, where ruju is possible. The second type of talaq, divorce, is known as khula', which is initiated by the wife. She doesn't like the relationship, doesn't want to continue. And obviously it initiated by the wife. So this is ba'in, where the husband cannot go back. During the time of the period, it becomes kind of final when it's recited. And then we have a third situation which is known as a mubarat, where there is tabarra against one another. Where husband and wife don't like one another, and there is mutual dislike for this relationship to continue. And this is also a binding, irrevocable kind of marriage. There are some differences in how things are done, but we don't have the time to go into details of it. The thing I will mention is that the ayat of Quran that we are discussing in Surah at-Talaq is mostly concentrating on the first of the three categories of divorce. It is talking about the husband-initiated divorce. This is where now we come to the last statement from the first ayat. لا تدري لعل الله يحدث بعد ذلك أمرا. You do not know, perhaps Allah will bring something new later on. This statement actually is an explanation for why there is iddah of 3 months. We know that, and it is a factual statement, even seen in the ahadith of the Aimma, where they talk about after divorce there is 3 months iddah, which means that the woman in that case cannot get married until after the iddah has expired. And one of the reasons given is that just to make sure there is no pregnancy. Otherwise, the iddah would then continue till the birth of the child. And remember what we talked last night about maintaining the wife in iddah would also be extended till the birth of the child. That's one reason. Because whenever we say that, people say, well, these days we have ultrasound. You don't need to wait 3 months to see whether she is pregnant or not. There are other reasons for it, and one of these, this is where we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm giving you this 3 months grace period. It is the husband who has initiated. He doesn't like to maintain the relationship. And in this ayat and in that situation, Allah says, okay, you divorce her, but you're not allowed to throw her out of the house. You still have to keep her in your house for the 3 months and maintain her, provide for her. Why is that done? Allah says, you don't know. Maybe in the 3 months, dimag theek ho jayega. You'll come back to your senses. Maybe if you did that out of anger, your anger will calm down and you will reconsider your decision. So that is the grace period that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving. So it's not only the issue of pregnancy, whether she's pregnant or not. And this is where, especially the issue that she stays in the house. This is what I'm saying, on the level of what we see on the ground in the community. Very rare people actually, fulfill these commandments of Quran when it comes to the issue of divorce. And this is because, so that maybe, when he is still at least sees her, especially when children are involved. If that husband who doesn't like the relationship, doesn't want to continue, if he looks at his wife, the way she is interacting with the children, maybe, his heart will become soft. And, he might change his, opinion at that time. And this is where the possibility of ruju comes in. There is a hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says, al-mutallaqa, the wife who has been divorced by the husband in the talaq, taktahil wa taqdabid wa tatayyib. She should, use even kohol, kajal as we call it, use khizab, use perfume, wa talbisu ma shi'ta min athiyab, and wear the good clothes. لأن الله عز وجل يقول, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تدري, you don't know. Maybe something new will happen. This poor fellow's mind would change. And this is where لعلها أن تقع في نفسه فيراجعها. Maybe something will change and he will do ruju. So all these rules there in the case of talaq here is so that, the possibility of reconciliation could be there. In the Sharia laws based on the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt, ruju doesn't even require any formal ceremony. Not even words need to be uttered for ruju by the husband, where the talaq will be revoked and considered null and void. Just a good word he says to her, or even he just touches her. That's it, the talaq becomes null and void. And this is where we see that, this ruling is there in order to try once more to salvage the marriage relationship between husband and the wife. Of course, we mentioned earlier that, one of the reasons is that just to make sure that she's not pregnant, otherwise the iddah will continue till the birth of the child. And this also gives the time for the couple, if they decide to part, they need some time to heal their own severance of the relationship. It's not that easy. It is traumatic for both the man and the woman. And so that 3 months also is a time where they can go through the process of healing. Now we go on to the second ayat of this surah. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the issue of, what happens when the iddah comes to the end. This is the translation. Then, فَإِذَا بَلَغَ أَجَلَهُنَّ فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ فَارِقُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. Then when they have completed their iddah, the 3 months have ended, there was no ruju, then before the completion of that 3 months iddah period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the husband, he is saying, فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. Either retain them honorably, أَوْ فَارِقُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ, or separate from them honorably. Now, this translation is based on Ali Qarai's choice of words. I have a slightly different translation there. We'll come to at the end. Ma'roof and ma'roof. Whatever you do, if you want to retain, You do it in a fair and just manner, in an honorable manner. And even if you want to let them go, even then maintain justice, fairness, and honor for one another. And then, of course, the ayat goes on, وَأَشْهِدُوا ذَوَيْ عَدْلٍ مِنْكُمْ, and get two just witnesses when the talaq is done. And these are the issues that inshallah we'll discuss later on. But let me just go on to this first part of it. You see, the choice here is only two, fa and aw. Either or. Once the iddah comes to close to its end, then there are two choices. Either you retain her with honor and respect and with fairness and justice by doing ruju. So the talaq will become null and void. And if the husband still decides, no, I'm not going to change my mind, then let her go with honor, dignity, fairness, and justice. And this is where we have to realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the previous ayahs talked about taqwa. That even if you are doing divorce, maintain this taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also remember they are hududullah. They are the limits that Allah has put on you, and honor and respect them. This is an important issue. There is no third option in Islam of keeping the wife suspended, neither married nor divorced. You hear situations, they are no more together, and the husband doesn't even give the divorce. He says, well, hum to nahi denge. And this is the situation where they'll leave her in suspension. Sometimes here, because we have two separate systems, we have shar'i talaq and the civil divorce. There are cases where they go to the court and divorce the wife according to the civil laws. So in the eyes of the law here, she is divorced. But in the eyes of the Sharia, she is not yet divorced. This is just a torture. And this is where, of course, in the Shia fiqh at least, we have this process that if a lady finds herself in such a situation where she is mazluma, she is being oppressed, and this is just being done out of revenge from the husband, then she can refer to the marja or the wakil of the marja, and if they are convinced, they will approach the husband, give it a notice to him, and if he doesn't still agree, then at least in our system, the marja or the wakil of the mujtahid has a right to pronounce the talaq, even if the husband is saying no. And this is, but there is no need to go to that. This is what I'm saying. Muslims have moved away from the Quran. If they know what the Quran says, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what the Rasul and the A'immah say, there will be no third option there. Either you retain her with honor and dignity, or let her go with honor and dignity. There is no third option there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then talks about this in another ayat also. I wanted to share that. This is from Surah Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَا أَجَلَهُنَّ. Again, very similar words. When you divorce the women and they reach to their term, means of the iddah has ended, then فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. Very similar to what we have in Surah Talaq. Retain them with honor. Or أَوْ سَرِّحُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. There it's فَارِقُهُنَّ, separate in divorce. Here is, سَرِّحُهُنَّ means set them free with, dignity and honor and fairness. And then the ayat goes on, وَلَا تُمْسِكُهُنَّ ضِرَارًا. And do not retain them for hurting them. Islam doesn't accept that third option of trying to, psychologically or in other ways, hurting them, either you retain them with fairness or you let them go. And whoever does that, then they should know that وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. They are zalim to themselves, because they will be liable for punishment on the day of Qiyamah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. Do not take Allah's ayat as a mockery. This is the reality on the ground. You know how far we have moved away from the Quran. Somebody who does that and goes for that third option, which is not there in Islam, that person actually has taken the ayat of Quran as a mockery. He is joking with the ayat of Quran, doesn't respect. And the ayat goes on, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, and remember the favor of Allah upon you, that which He had revealed to you of the book and the wisdom. That is the ni'mat of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يَعِذُكُمْ بِهِ, He is advising you through the book and the wisdom which comes from the Prophet, maintained by the Ahlul Bayt. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and fear from displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. You should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. Nothing would be hidden from Him. Whatever we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of it. Now the term which came in this Surah Talaq, فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ فَارِقُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. This is a slightly different translation. Instead of honorably, fair, with fairness. This is from Surah Talaq. You'll see the same words have come again. فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. This is the ayat that we looked earlier. Then there is the third ayat, that when you are given then talaq, after talaq, there are only two options. فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Either you do imsak. You do imsak every day, in Ramadan. What does that imsak mean? Behold, you beheld yourself from eating and drinking. So here, imsakun, you hold on to the wife. Bima'ruf, or you either retaining them in fairness, أو تصريح بإحسان, or you let them go free. Free them with kindness. بإحسان. Because we some of the dollars and cents disputes that you see in divorce cases, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you want to let your wife go and you're giving talaq, أو تصريح بإحسان, let them go free, بإحسان, with kindness. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically wants from us. And these are the real issues in life. Islam is not only a religion of ibadat. Doesn't only talk about namaz and roza and hajj and things like that. It also gives emphasis on the issue of family life. When we talk about huquq al-ibad, the rights of the people, the reason why Quran talks about salat and zakat again and again and again in Quran is just to give that idea that salat, namaz is the symbol of haqqullah, and zakat is the symbol of huquq al-ibad. And these things go hand in hand. And remember that this issue of respecting huquq al-ibad starts from within the house. Sometimes in Urdu there is a saying that when you lit a candle, you'll see the light goes far away. But if you just look around the candle, it is darkness. It shouldn't be like that we are very charitable to the members in the community. We help everyone outside. But when it comes to those who are close to us, we take them for granted. And this is where we are told that, these examples, Surah Talaq, Surah Tahrim I mentioned last night, These are the examples given to us to realize that when it comes to maintaining the family life, it is a challenge, it is demanding, but we have to come up to that level where whether we maintain it or we let it go, ma'roof and ihsan should be the guiding principle. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would like to say from all the mu'mineen. Let me end with another hadith tonight on the issue of fasting, just to connect with this issue of huququl ibad and respecting one another. We have talked about it when we talked about the example in the quiz about a person doing ghibat in fasting. Does the fast become batil? No, but you lose the extra sawab. One more hadith from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Where he says, إِنَّ الصِّيَامِ لَيْسَ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ وَالشَّرَابِ وَحْدَهُ. Fasting doesn't only mean imsak, from food and drink. No, or keeping away from food and drink. Rather, he uses the example of Bibi Maryam, and he says, remember, قالت مريم إني نظرت للرحمن صوما. When Isa alayhi salam was born, and she was now going to go back to her own community, she was very worried about about her own reputation. What will people say? That I'm coming with a newborn child while I am not married. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Maryam, don't worry about it. Just say to them, you are fasting. What kind of fast did Maryam do? That I will not talk today. So it was the fast of speech. Just imagine if we had been asked to do that for 30 days. But Imam relates this, our fasting, with Bibi Maryam's fasting, and he says, a sawman was samtan, fasting with silence. And then he says, فَإِذَا صُمْتُمْ فَاحْفَظُوا أَلْسِنَتَكُمْ. When you fast, take care of your tongue. Do not say things which are wrong. وَغَضُّوا أَبْصَارَكُمْ. And even, put your eyes, the glances down. Don't look at scenes which are haram. وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا. And do not argue and fight with one another when you are fasting. وَلَا تَحَاسَدُوا. And do not have jealousy towards one another. And then the sixth Imam then quotes a story from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet was passing by and he saw a woman, تَصُبُّ جَارِيَةً لَهَا, was abusing, gali de rahi thi, a maid that she had, and she was physically abusing her while she was fasting. فَدَعَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ بِطَعَامٍ. The Prophet asked somebody to bring a food item, maybe khurma. And then he said to her, Kuli, eat this. And she said, Inni sa'ima, but I'm fasting, Ya Rasulullah. And this is where the Prophet says, كَيْفَ تَكُونِينَ سَائِمًا. How can you be fasting? وَقَدْ سَبَبْتِ جَارِيَتِكَ. While you have verbally abused your servant. إِنَّ الصَّوْمَ لَيْسَ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ وَالشَّرَابِ فَقَطْ. The Prophet says to her that fasting doesn't only, is not only related to abstaining from food and drink. You also should be, careful in what we are saying. And this is where the Imam then continues by saying, إِذَا صُمْتَ. When you fast, your ears and eyes also should fast from haram. And وَدَعِ الْمِرَاء, refrain from arguments. وَعَزَى الْخَادِمِ. And harassing your servant. And لَا يَكُنْ عَلَيْكَ وِقَارُ الصَّائِمِ. You should have that dignity of somebody who is fasting. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَوْمَ صَوْمِكَ كَيَوْمِ فِطْرِكَ. Your day of fasting should not be same as the day when you are not fasting in Sha'ban or Shawwal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to understand the reality of fasting and be among the true followers of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad salawatullah ajma'een.